Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're just still setting up a little bit and hopefully maybe getting some music on. Thanks for bearing with us.
I have to make a playlist, huh?
Yeah. I hear some music.
This is some generic jazz. Welcome, everyone.
We'll give it a minute. I know Shane is running late, so I may just have to go ahead and start, and that's okay. I want to be mindful of everybody's time. So I know, Ben, that you were going to play some music, but if you would like to go ahead and get started, I want this meeting to be as rich as it can. And if you don't see Shayna, I will go ahead and get us started. I am so excited, for this day and for everyone being here. So just to confirm, Ben, has Shayna come in?
So Shayna is not yet with us.
Okay. I'll go ahead and get us started. So again, I want to thank everyone who is joining us today, and thank you for attending the Black Appalachian Listening Session. My name is Marcia Dinkins, and I am the lead and executive director for BLAC and Black Women Rising. BLAC was launched in June 18th of 2021 with the generous support of the Hines Endowment, as well as the High Tides Foundation. And we are pleased to add to our list of supporters the McKnight Foundation, Mosaic, and Groundwork as supporters of our work as we continue our strategic story and narrative to lift the stories of Blacks in Appalachia, for the reallocation of resources, and to confront the degenerative policies that continue to extract, exploit, exclude, and erase the deep roots and contributions of Blacks in Appalachia and/or Black Appalachians. To continue our work and to provide resources in rural and Appalachian areas, we are hosting this Justice40 listening session with Ardith Griffin from Emerald Cities Collaborative, Sonia Kakiri, and Norma. I will not try to botch her name up, so yeah, I'll just say Norma. The purpose of this listening session is to unpack just what is Justice40, what is the intent of Justice40, and the benefits and harsh realities of Justice40. What is currently happening within the state and local government, as some agencies are not public facing as we would like them to be. You will also hear about the ECC's Justice40 Playbook, which I'm excited about, and the ways in which it can be used to help communities build state and local coalitions and engage their local officials in their coalition building. Our goal is that you, as a participant, will have a clear understanding of Justice40, receive a tool that you can use to develop community plans, engage with your community leaders to build out that community plan, and understand how this speaks to energy democracy as well. This session is the first of our series, as our goal through this partnership with ECC is to work with members of Black across the Ohio River Valley to have a strong voice and understanding of ways reallocation and allocation of resources can be brought to their communities. Just a little housekeeping: participants will have an opportunity to ask questions. And you can also put your questions in the chat. We have a Q&A box. So if you would put those questions in the Q&A box, that would be great. If your question goes into the chat, please know that we do have individuals watching the chat. And if a question can be answered in the chat, they will do so. We will take time in between the presentation. Artie will call and ask for questions. And at that time, we will take, we will first read from the Q&A box. So again, it's important that you put your question there so that we can get it answered. As a disclaimer, we want you to know, because of limited time, we will not be able to get to everyone's question, but we will save the chat and we will meet back together so that we can get an answer to your question. So again, thank you for bearing with us, as well as thank you for participating. I again want to say thank you to Artie Griffin and the ECC staff. And it is my pleasure to introduce you, as well as Sonia and Nora. I know, Artie, you will be leading most of the conversation. And as such, you will also tell our participants more about ECC and the work that you do. So I am so honored and privileged to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Dinkins. And I will just go ahead and share my screen. Let's see if we can handle this on my end. All right, there we are. Let's get back to the beginning of the presentation. All right, so thank you so much, Bishop Dinkins, for that warm, wonderful introduction. And thank you all for inviting us into this space and allowing us to have this dialogue about Justice 40, what it could mean, what it isn't, and kind of how we can leverage this moment into an organizing movement for the future. Again, my name is Artie Griffin. I am the Policy Analyst and Legislative Director with Emerald Cities Collaborative. I'm joined with my colleagues, Sonia Kikeri, our National Director for Policy and Civic Engagement, and Nora El-Marzuki, our Senior Manager for Energy Democracy. We are working with Emerald Cities Collaborative. Just a little bit about ECC before we dive into our discussion on Justice 40. Emerald Cities Collaborative, it is a nationwide nonprofit that really focuses on operating within that intersection of environmental, economic, and racial justice. So what that means for us is that we are really focused on uplifting and advancing policies and projects that really build the health and the wealth of BIPOC, frontline, and environmental justice communities. So a lot of our programs focus on creating workforce development opportunities and career pathway opportunities into the clean energy space. We really try to build collaborative tables amongst community members and anchor institutions within those communities. So hospital systems, education systems such as universities, building tables to really facilitate dialogue amongst the institutions and the communities to ensure that they are meeting each other's needs. And then also we, try to promote tools and resources that help better understand just the nuances of our federal government and our state and local government systems, how funding opportunities work, and how we can better ensure that local communities are able to access the programs and funding that these systems provide. So with that, we will go into the Justice 40 Initiative and the People's Justice 40 Plus Community Benefits Playbook. So just to kind of take a step back, at the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration, one of the first executive orders that was signed within the first couple of weeks of the Biden-Harris administration was the Executive Order 14008, and that is better known as the Tackling the Climate Crisis at Home and Abroad Executive Order. And it's that order that announced the Justice 40 Initiative. And in addition to the Justice 40 Initiative, it also created the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Committee. That should be Advisory Council, and as well as the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. Those two things, the WEJAC and the CGIST, those aren't directly those were not directly created within the Justice 40 Initiative. Those are two, that's the council and the tool, those were created separate and apart. However, I did want to touch on those because those will have a role in how Justice 40 is implemented. So what is Justice 40? So Justice 40, as I really want to ensure that I press upon today, that this is a federal initiative. It's not a federal statute. It's not a rule. This is a federal approach that the Biden-Harris administration is taking to really ensure that equity is embedded in all of their administration program or their federal programs that all of their agencies operate. And that initiative says that they have set this goal that at least 40% of overall benefits of certain federal investments are flowing into disadvantaged communities. Now, if that goal seems vague or confusing, please note that you are not alone in those feelings. I think that is one thing that a lot of us are trying to really unpack. The administration within the initiative has charged several of their offices with creating recommendations as to what that means. What are overall benefits? How are we identifying and defining disadvantaged communities? That is one thing that they are charged with doing, is creating recommendations as to how this is going to be implemented in real time. And so those are the idea of benefits and disadvantaged communities. Those are two concepts that we are still grappling with, and we'll really talk about that as we go throughout the presentation. But one thing that is clear as what federal investments they were talking about when they identified what benefits of these certain federal investments should be coming from. So as you can see, those federal investments are the clean energy and energy efficiency, clean transit, affordable and sustainable housing, training and workforce development, remediation and reduction of legacy pollution, and development of clean water infrastructure. So when we talk about where the benefits are, what federal investments the benefits will be coming from, it's those 6 areas of focus that they'll be focusing on. And then one additional aspect about the Justice40 Initiative that I do want to touch on is they also required one of the offices within the White House to create an environmental justice scorecard. I wanted to highlight that because it hasn't been really talked about a lot. I would imagine probably because it's still in its development, but that is a tool that I think will be helpful in terms of having holding the administration accountable as to this 40% goal. So what this scorecard is supposed to be is a public-facing tool that will essentially show the progress of Justice40 and also keep track of various environmental justice priorities that the administration has identified. Again, that tool is not available just yet. It was supposed to be released earlier this year, but we are still anxiously awaiting for that tool as well. So the overall takeaway I want you guys to have from when we talk about what is Justice40, at least from the standpoint as it's coming from the federal government, just a reminder that this is a federal initiative, and it is a goal that at least 40% of benefits will flow toward disadvantaged communities. I think there's a lot of chatter and communication about whether that means actual federal funding. And I think people think that there's this special pool of Justice40 money that is out there for communities to try to apply for. But again, this is an approach. There are special Justice40 programs that will be highlighted that people can identify as a way of understanding that we should really be focusing on these programs, because these are the programs that they're going to be emphasizing, that at least 40% of those benefits should be coming into disadvantaged communities. But just really want to focus on that this is a goal. This is not a mandate, especially as we relates to when funding gets passed down to states and local governments. So just again, reiterating that this is a 40% goal and not a specific pool of funding. And then that's actually a lot of, I will stop there just to touch in to see, Sonia, do we have any questions just yet? Because I feel like that is a huge feature of this presentation. And I just want to make sure that if there's any questions that kind of popped up into people's heads at that moment, that we take the time to address any of those questions.
Not yet.
Perfect. All right, then I will keep it moving. So going back to the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, as I stated earlier, that is they are going to have an impact on how Justice40 is implemented. Specifically, they are taking on an advisory role. So as I mentioned earlier, in order to implement Justice40, the White House has identified several offices within their administration that is going to work together to create recommendations as to how agencies should be implementing this initiative. In the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, the role that they will be playing is advising those group of offices on what recommendations they feel would be beneficial in terms of implementing this program. So when this initiative was introduced back in January of last year, the White House Advisory and Justice Council shortly came out with their own recommendations thereafter. I won't go through all of their recommendations because they were very extensive and it was an incredibly exhaustive list. But I do want to touch on some of the overarching themes of those recommendations, just because I want to give a framework for how the type of guidance that these agencies that the White House offices will be getting as they grapple with what recommendations they need to be making and to ensure that the Justice40 initiative is implemented and that they are meeting their goal. So some of those recommendations, they provided a very much an in-depth analysis of what programs they felt should fall within the Justice40 initiative, but they also made recommendations as it relates to ensuring that that 100% of any federal program investments or benefits, that they do no harm to environmental justice communities. I think we have seen very much how the federal government will oftentimes fund programs that they feel will boost the economy in an area. And then once they implement that project to boost that economy, it ends up pushing out some of the community members that were within that community that they were trying to benefit from the beginning. So ensuring that any federal program investment does no harm to environmental justice communities. They also highlight that Justice40 should be the floor and not, or I'm sorry, it should be, yes, it should be the floor and not necessarily the ceiling. That, you know, historically, these communities have been divested from for a very long time. And so we should be ensuring that at minimum 40% of the benefits go into into communities, if not 100% of those benefits. And finally, they made recommendations as to what are benefits. Specifically, they stated that benefits should be direct and indirect investments in frontline communities. So frontline communities should be seeing those investment dollars coming directly into their communities to see those benefits. And they identified, you know, how we should be identifying disadvantaged communities and ensuring that we're including race within that calculation, because we know that when it comes to identifying environmental justice or disadvantaged communities, race is the factor in terms of understanding what an EJ community is. And further, one of the things I really want to highlight too is that they also talked about what benefits are not. Given that this advisory council will be advising the White House on what the recommendations should be, I think it's very important that they name what benefits should not be considered in that list. Because again, so often we will see that, oh, well, we put up a shopping mall. That's a benefit to the community, when in reality, that's not a benefit. So I appreciate that they are very intentional about naming that. And again, I do understand that this WEJAC, they are strictly playing an advisory role. They do not have any direct authority to make any policy making or decision making. However, they do play an advisory role. And I think it's worth noting that in the most recent WEJAC meeting, the chair of the Council on Environmental Quality, she took it a point to not just highlight the work that this WEJAC has done, but also made it a point to highlight the fact that their recommendations have been guiding their decision-making and their policy-making around Justice40. So just wanting to let folks know that there are people out there who are influencing the CEQ and Office of Management and Budget and the National Climate Advisor, the folks who are creating these recommendations, and that they're good recommendations. So hopefully they stay in line with their guidance. Which brings us to the interim Justice40 implementation guidance. So after WEJAC made their recommendations, as I mentioned, the Office of Management and Budget, the Council on Environmental Quality, and the National Climate Advisor worked to put out their interim implementation guidance for Justice40. And kind of my two big takeaways from what this guidance did is it kind of called on two different mandates from the agency's perspective. First, they required all of the agencies. So as I've mentioned, this initiative is a whole of government approach. So every single administrative agency, not just the Department of Energy or Transportation or the EPA, it called on everybody. So DOJ, all of them are supposed to be looking at all of their federal programs and identifying what in their array of programs that they house within their agencies, which of those programs are focused on the 6 main topic areas of investments that we discussed earlier. So what programs focus on climate change, what programs focus on sustainable housing, what programs focus on clean water. So looking at all of their programs, and then once they've identified those programs, identify what are the program benefits. And once they identify those program benefits, ensuring that they have mechanisms in place to not just identify those benefits, but to track those program benefits. So that way they can see specifically where in the country those programs are going. The way I see this aspect of the guidance is it's kind of a landscape analysis before the White House can advise agencies on how to implement Justice 40. They have to have an understanding of where are we right now, what programs are out there, what benefits are these programs providing, and are there mechanisms in place to ensure that we can track these benefits? That way we can make good on our 40% goal. So that was kind of the first step. And then the other mandate was creating this Justice 40 pilot program. So essentially the White House has already identified 21 programs that fall within the Justice 40 mission. And with those target program, or with those 21 programs, not only are agencies supposed to be doing the work of identifying the benefits and tracking where they're going, these programs were targeted to maximize the benefits to disadvantaged communities. And what that means is not only are they identifying where the benefits are going, but they're trying to assess, are disadvantaged communities accessing these programs that we have and the benefits that they're providing? And if they're not accessing these programs, then what, if any, are the barriers or constraints on these communities' abilities to participate in this program? And then once they've kind of identified the barriers and the constraints, then they need to identify different resources or solutions to alleviating these benefits or these barriers to these benefits. So these 21 programs are specifically uplifted to ensure that they are absolutely being targeted to disadvantaged communities. And in addition to these two mandates, again, that they were the implementation guidance tried to provide additional context to what benefits could include. They specifically said that benefits are indirect investments and program outcomes that positively impact disadvantaged communities. So appreciate the fact that they are following that WEJAC guidance in a sense that it should be indirect in both direct and indirect investments, but then also they really weigh heavily on those program outcomes. I think it's going to, given that the programs that each of the agencies offer are so different, I think in order for us to get a better understanding of what those program benefits are, we'll have to kind of await for that final piece of guidance that hopefully is coming soon. However, the guidance did try to provide some examples of what we could anticipate those program outcome benefits could look like. We're talking greenhouse gas reduction, increased access to training and workforce development, those type of benefits. But again, as of right now, we're still trying to wait to see whether or not this definition of benefits will include direct funding into disadvantaged communities. I think that is obviously the hope from ECC's perspective and what we are pushing for. And I know that other advocates are for it, even the WEJAC is pushing for. So we all hopefully await to see what comes of that definition. And then, there we go. And so the other guidance that the implementation guidance provided was, how are we defining disadvantaged communities? The guidance kind of leaned on several factors that could identify what disadvantaged communities could look like, but they also really focused on this climate and economic justice screening tool that I want to take a second to really kind of uplift for better or for worse. So the climate and economic justice screening tool is a tool, again, that we discussed earlier, that came out of that original executive order. This tool is supposed to help agencies define and identify disadvantaged communities. It's an interactive tool that anybody can access right now. As of right now, it's still in what they're calling the beta phase. So it's not a final tool just yet. So agencies haven't really been implementing this tool, given it's still kind of in the testing phase, and they're still soliciting public comment as to how they can improve the tool. But I think it's important to note that I've been hearing and we've been hearing from a lot of folks saying that the tool, while it's supposed to be identifying these disadvantaged communities, it's at this point is not an accurate representation of people's lived experiences. And I think that's important to note because, as I stated, this is still in its beta phase, so it's not final. As of right now, they are still soliciting public comment until, I believe, next week, May 25th. And I really encourage folks to log on, to look at it. You can find it simply by Googling Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. We also have a primer on the tool if folks are so inclined. It also kind of identifies some concerns with the tool and how folks might be able to provide public comment if they wish. It also includes some sample language that folks can include as well. So given that this tool, we don't yet know how much of an emphasis or how much it's going to be used in the Justice40 implementation, I think the final guidance will kind of give us a better understanding as to whether or not, or I guess how much it will, agencies will have to, will they be mandated to use the tool, or are they just going to use the tool as a resource? But given the fact that this is going to be a way for agencies to target benefits into disadvantaged communities, I think it's very important that we pay attention to the process of how it's being made so that it's being done in an equitable way and it actually speaks to what it's intended to do. So before we get into where are we now, I think that's a good kind of stopping point to just gauge where folks are, if they have questions, or if we should go ahead and keep it moving.
There is one question that I think will be answered later on in the presentation as well. How can Justice40 be accessed by common citizens who care about educating the community to advocate for themselves when the mayor and city council fail to stand for the environment health of their own community?
Yeah, so we'll definitely get into how ECC is trying to organize around this movement, but I anticipated that would be a question that a lot of folks had. And I think kind of at this juncture, just in the way that the federal, how I think this is going to play out is, and we can kind of use the bipartisan infrastructure law as, I guess, a case study, is, the bipartisan infrastructure law, huge $1.3 trillion bill that is supposed to increase workforce development opportunities, create new energy opportunities for the country, build up roads, and just invest in our infrastructure. And so along with that bill came an executive order saying that the funding mechanisms or the programs that are funded through EJA should be considered through the Justice40 lens, so that basically telling the agencies, you need to think about Justice40 as you are creating these programs and implementing these programs. So with that funding, the way that funding is going to kind of, once they go to the federal agencies, as the agencies distribute that funding, a lot of the funding is going to go into state agencies. So while I think it's important to work with your local level officials, your mayors, your city councils, your civic associations, I think it's important to work with those members, but also to start working to get to know some of your state agencies, because a lot of them are going to be wielding the power as to how this money is distributed. So it's not just working with local officials, it's really trying to engage and work with state officials as well. But I will jump off that tangent and keep it going, and then we can kind of address that more at the end. So kind of where are we now? Just wanting to just take a step back. And, we've got the initiative. We know that it means that 40% of these benefits are going to be targeted for disadvantaged communities. And we've got the interim guidance as to how agencies should be evaluating their programs, evaluating their benefits, how they should be identifying their benefits and targeting or identifying ways that they can target specific communities. But how are they doing this? So I will be clear. And I guess from my personal perspective, as I have kind of been in this work and seeing how this is being played out, I definitely think that there are agencies that are doing better than others, or at least they are a bit more public facing about their efforts to bring Justice40 to life and to carry out its mission. You've got agencies like DOT and DOE, Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, Environmental Protection Agency, who have been very public about their efforts. DOE is ensuring that, energy democracy is a principle in which they are implementing their programs, or how they are viewing the Justice40 Initiative. Department of Transportation says that this is a form of for us to hold ourselves accountable in terms of ensuring that all of our programs are implemented in a more equitable manner. And then EPA, I will say, has committed to ensuring that they are going to go above and beyond the 40% goal, but also they're not only committing that over 40% of their benefits will go into disadvantaged communities, but they're also committing to ensuring that over 40% of their investments will go into disadvantaged communities. I think that will, they are very cognizant of the fact that it could be difficult to track that funding to really ensure that that is the case. However, they are committed to ensuring that they're working with all of their grantees, all the recipients of their funding, to ensure that they can really track to ensure that the investments are getting into disadvantaged communities. So knowing that some of the agencies are kind of setting that bar, I'm hoping that will translate across the administration, and all of the agencies will kind of follow suit and set those good examples. So now that we have a better understanding of what Justice40 is, what can we do now to prepare ourselves to meet this moment? And the way that ECC has taken our perspective is how can we help communities organize around this funding? And one of the best ways, or at least one of the ways that we are looking at this, is starting to educate communities. What we have done is put together what we call the People's Justice40 Plus Community Benefits Playbook. This is a playbook that is written with the community at its center point. Trying to couch this moment as, obviously, this is a federal initiative, so it is a top-down initiative, but how can we turn this around and make this a bottom-up movement? How can we, instead of allowing the federal government to define what are benefits, how can we be articulating to them, these are the benefits that our communities need? So when you decide what program benefits look like, they need to be these benefits and they need to meet our needs. So what the People's Justice40 Plus Community Benefits Playbook does, it's got several chapters. It's about 9 right now, but sometimes it does grow. So at this point, we're the first 3 chapters, what is Justice40, why a community benefit playbook, and show me the money. These 3 chapters really focus on what I just did here, unpacking Justice40, understanding what it is, understanding what it isn't. It talks about a community benefit plan and why we felt that this playbook was necessary to meet this moment. And then also it kind of, it goes into, how do we understand funding? Where does, when we have all of these various federal spending bills, whether it's the bipartisan infrastructure law, the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan, whenever these federal spending bills happen, where does the money go from there? And just tries to break down how the pathway it goes, whether it's in grant format, if it's, so whether it's either formula grants, competitive grants, direct funding to agencies for them to implement specific programs, just provides a better understanding of what it looks like for federal spending bills to actually be implemented. And so after we provide that kind of grounding understanding of what we're looking at, then we kind of unpack in 5 different sector-specific playbooks that specifically focus on various issues such as energy, water, and economic justice, environmental and climate justice, and then transportation equity. So unpacking each of those specific issues. So if communities have concerns about their utility bills, focusing on energy. If communities are concerned about clean drinking water, focus on the water justice playbook. If workforce development opportunities are your concern, economic inclusion, and then so on with environmental and climate justice and transportation as well. So these playbooks go a step further of saying, okay, these are your community's needs. So based on the bipartisan infrastructure law, kind of trying to connect the dots between here is the funding source or the program that was funded through EJA, the bipartisan infrastructure law. And so here's the funding, identifying how it can meet your community's need, identifying who folks should be kind of building coalitions around to access that funding, and then providing different strategies on how to access that funding. So, for example, if you're concerned about lead pipe replacement within your community. So within the bipartisan infrastructure law, I think it was over $11 billion was dedicated to what we call the state revolving loan funds. And within that fund, states are going to get money specifically to replace their lead pipes. So if that's your concern, or if that's what the need is of your community, the book really talks about how you can work with your build local coalitions within, water groups, other community organizations, other communities or community organizations and other communities that are experiencing the same concerns, building coalitions around understanding what are your water needs, where are our lead pipes, and making sure that those concerns are elevated to the state level, so that way the state can include those water projects on their intended use plan, which is going to be funded through these state SRF dollars. So just really trying to unpack all of the details for folks so that they can better understand, if this is my issue, who do I need to be going to ensure that my issue is heard, and how can I advocate for more funding to make sure my needs are met. So that is kind of the goal of each of those individual sector playbooks, to really understand those issues. And then where do they go once you understand your community issues? What's the next step? Who do I engage? How do I talk to folks? What should I be, what strategies should I be using? So forth and so on. So, and then that last, the chapter, the community benefit plans from policy to community impact. Those are plans that we are ways for communities to really rally around a specific issue, or essentially. So let me take a step back. So with community benefit plans, I think that might spark some thoughts into people's heads, like, oh, community benefit agreements. Community benefit agreements or community workforce agreements are oftentimes negotiated amongst local governments and labor leaders and developers to implement different community development projects within their communities. However, oftentimes those community benefit plan or agreements don't actually prioritize the needs of the community. They just prioritize what they feel the needs might be. So instead of rallying around community benefit agreements, what we are proposing communities do is create their own community benefit plans. And what these plans are is they will center the needs of the community, and they will be led and written by the needs of, or written by the community members to reflect their needs. And the idea is with these community benefit plans is, as all of this funding is starting to make its way from the federal government through the various federal programs into federal state agencies and being distributed amongst the state community or the communities within the state, we want to make sure that communities are prepared to go to their local government officials or their state agencies or even their state level legislators to say, these are the needs of our community. We know that funding is available through EJA or through ARPA or other various federal spending or various federal spending bills. We know that this money is available. Here are the needs that we need you to fund. It's these are the needs that we need and the benefits that will help us. And really throwing back in their faces that, the federal government has created this federal initiative called the Justice40 Initiative. I know what it does. I know what it means. And the way that you can make good on that initiative is by funding our plans. So those are community benefit plans. And so I always like to not just, since I feel like talking at y'all for about 40 minutes, want to leave you guys with some actionable next steps. So just some of the things that, as you guys are reviewing the Justice40 Playbook, which Sonia, if you don't mind dropping those links in the chat, Some things that you guys can be doing as you're reviewing these playbooks is, start assessing your community needs. And if you are aware of your community needs, then I think it's important to start building coalitions with your community partners. As I mentioned earlier, we can think outside the box. So community coalitions aren't just, the community members. It can be various community-based organizations that are advocating for the community needs. If your concerns are water, there are so many water advocacy groups and organizations that can help lend some power behind your coalitions as well. So thinking outside the box of who your coalition community members or who your community partners could look like, and really starting to build those coalitions. And then once you've kind of started to gain those partnerships and are building those coalitions, really start to engage your local and state government officials. Those are the folks who will be monitoring the money as it is being spent in communities. So it's important to really engage them in the conversation. And then if you guys are able, I would highly encourage you to apply for our emergent community capacity grants. These grant programs will help, I think, in this process. And I
think Nora's on, yeah.
Yep, I will kick it over to my colleague Nora to give you guys a better understanding of what the emergent community capacity grant process is and what it looks like.
Hey y'all, thanks so much, Artie. My name is Nora Merzuki. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here with Emerald Cities Collaborative today. I'm really excited to share with you some information about the Emergent Communities Capacity Program. It is both a funding opportunity along with technical support assistance through monthly workshops and one-to-one support. The idea behind it is we'd love to support BIPOC and frontline community-led organizations who are recently or newly incorporating energy systems analysis, and energy democracy into their intersectional justice lens, and who want to take that work deeper. So y'all have heard a little bit about Justice40 today. There's the support and opportunity to be part of leveraging Justice40. Really, the application process is quite simple. It's 5 questions that we're asking for, and this funding of $25,000 to $50,000 can go towards literally anything other than lobbying. So that looks like stipends, communications, facilitation, community engagement, fundraising, you name it. You can use it as long as it's not used for lobbying. 10 organizations will be inducted into a 1-year cohort with the potential of non-cost extensions. We are funded for this program for 2 years. So every year we'll be inviting folks to apply. This is a pilot program, so who would ever be inducted into this cohort will be very much part of shaping what this program looks like for the future. The only types of sort of requirements for reporting is really finding a way to tell your story in a way that's useful for you and reporting back. So oftentimes grant funds are like these really boring reports that ask really boring questions. And we want it to be an opportunity for you to creatively tell your story. That might look like a video, that might look like a report, whatever seems to work best for your community uses. We also request a completion of the Energy Democracy Scorecard, which Sonia just dropped in the chat. It's a survey looking at energy democracy, the 4 pillars of energy democracy being moral economy, social justice, regenerative energy, and good governance. And so we have all these tools to support communities in building their energy democracy analysis. And we hope that will lead into a completed community development plan, which I know that Artie has probably spoken about a little bit today. And so we're really just hoping that this offers increased community capacity in energy democracy, support organizations in their base building, and really advance energy democracy policies. So the workshops themselves will really be determined by the cohort in requesting what they're interested in. So it would be really shaped based on what y'all are looking at. So we really hope that, groups will apply. One last thing I'll say is that it is funded by the Bezos Earth Fund, JPB Foundation, and the Broad Foundation. So like I said, we're really targeting BIPOC and frontline leadership community-based organizations. So we hope y'all will apply. We're also having an info session on Thursday, May 19th at 5:30 Eastern Time, and I will drop the Zoom link, the registration in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nora. I would just really encourage anyone that meets that is a BIPOC frontline EJ-led community-based organization to apply for that grant. I think it will go a long way in really helping to implement or leverage this Justice40 moment to ensure and will decrease funding and benefits into your community.
We have one more question. Institute, West Virginia, a historically Black community known to have burdensome history of chemical facilities, is not among the communities considered disadvantaged under the Justice40 methodology. Is that concerning? And what should be made of the CJust tool not reflecting many lived experiences so far?
I think it's absolutely concerning. I'm hearing a lot of different examples in that same vein in which the CJust tool is not picking up communities that should absolutely be considered disadvantaged, especially when you talk about some of the legacy pollution that's happening within our country. And so I think that's where I advocate that you comment. I have been sitting in on a lot of the WEJAC sessions and just talking to a bunch of different advocacy groups, and they're all really pushing their members to comment on the CJust tool. I think it's indicative of the fact of how much comments that they're receiving, that the initial deadline was in April, but then they pushed it back to May, probably because they were receiving a lot of concerns of this nature. And so making sure that your voice is heard in that process, I think is incredibly helpful. I would also note that a lot of the agencies, while they kind of await for CJust to be up and running and for them to get a better understanding of how CJust is going to be implemented in their processes and procedures, I think they're very cognizant of the fact that a lot of indicators that would show a disadvantaged community are not being considered. And so I think they're working on the back end to figure out how they can remedy that issue. I might be giving them too much credit, but I know that at least some of the representatives from the agencies have really been speaking to ensuring that they're doing everything that they can to not only identify underserved communities, but also identify the most overburdened communities. So the communities that are feeling a lot of cumulative impacts of various socioeconomic and climate related indicators. So I guess my first response would be to comment, let them know, provide them examples so that they're very aware. But then also I think this is a way that we can really start pushing local and state leaders to get involved, because the more funding that comes to their state and benefits their communities, the better it is for them, the better it is for their state. So I think I think that's why we're taking this as a moment of organization, because I think, Justice40, we don't know how long this moment is going to last, but I think if we start organizing around this idea of how do we ensure that we are lifting up our community needs and ensuring that we're engaging in those conversations with the relevant officials to ensure that we have funding access to the programs and funding benefits that are coming into the state. I think we can use this moment as a way to organize around these issues and really elevate the concerns and needs of our communities. So I apologize. That's not.
We have one more question, but I want to make sure that we have time for Shayna to speak. So we are going to email back the answer to that question, Mike, and we'll make sure that everyone gets a copy of it. Shayna, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon. I really appreciate everybody being here this afternoon. I really just have closing remarks to make, if you will. and that the Black Appalachian Coalition, we really appreciate the time and space that everybody affords us to be able to participate in these listening sessions. We also try really hard to make sure that the topics and the information that we're providing is very timely. And based on everything that we've discussed today, I think that we have hit that nail on the head, and that we are in a historical moment in which our government, on the state and federal level, they have the ability to make investments in our communities, and then also ensuring that impacted communities and impacted groups of people are receiving the types of services that we need. So I really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us this afternoon for today's listening session, particularly Orvie for their support and Reimagine for their support as well. We would not be able to do this without you. Emerald Cities Collaborative is something that's new to me, and I look forward to learning a lot more about the various opportunities that you have. One of the things I would like to ask participants to consider is to mark your calendars for July 22nd through the 24th, as we will be having a policy summit. So that will give us a concentrated period of time to be able to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the topics that we have been talking about over the course of these listening sessions. If you're interested, you can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and subscribing to our YouTube channel, in which we make recordings of these listening sessions and various events available to the public. So please refer to that as a resource. If you're interested in joining our email list, volunteering with the coalition, joining the coalition, or making a donation to our work, you can visit the blackappalachiancoalition.org website, and I'll put that in the chat. I will add this little piece additionally, in that I have really appreciated my participation in time with BLAC, in that for much of my life, I assumed that Appalachia was not mine. It was not necessarily a thing that I needed to be focused on or invest in. And I'm so glad that over the course of my adulthood, that has been proven wrong. And so coalitions such as BLAC, the work that Emerald Cities Collaborative does, Orvie and Reimagine, it's just really, really refreshing and invigorating to know that there are people that have as much love and consideration and respect for Appalachia that I do. So again, just thank everybody for taking the time to join us, and I will put our website in the chat.
Well, if we have a couple more minutes, maybe I'll ask that last question. Is that all right with folks? Awesome. What is the importance of states strengthening environmental justice protections to leverage any federal investments dictated by Justice40, and the potential for future presidential administrations to end the Justice40 Initiative? And this is a separate question, are there any state environmental justice initiatives that you've identified as examples for other states to follow?
All right, I will take that last part first, because it's first and foremost in my mind. So I think there are states that have started working on ensuring that they are taking environmental justice concerns into consideration. You've got states like New York, who actually has kind of started this Justice40 conversation. They created a state statute around Justice40. And then you also have states like California, who are working to identify disadvantaged communities and target them with federal or state investments as a result of that disadvantaged status. So there are some states that are working in this space. However, obviously those states that I just identified are very blue states. So I think it's important that we start to elevate, not that we aren't already, but just continue to elevate these issues at the state level and start calling on more state action as it relates to providing funding supports for environmental justice communities. I think when we talk about the potential to end Justice40 Initiative based on a change of administration, I think that's even more important to be working at your state level, because oftentimes our state and local governments are going to have a much bigger impact on our actual daily lives than the federal government in and of itself. So I think it's incredibly important that we should be elevating these issues at the state level, and that we can point to states that are doing are creating initiatives around environmental justice. There was a report that was put out by UCLA that kind of highlighted the varying state statutes that I cannot find it at the top of my head, but that's something that I can provide with Bishop Dinkins, and they can they can put out there so folks can take a look at that as well. And then I'm sorry, Sonia, can you remind me of the first part of that question?
Yes, it was. I think you answered it. What is the importance of states strengthening environmental justice protections to leverage any federal investments dictated by Justice40? And I will be dropping the UCLA report in the chat as well.
Perfect. And then just to echo, just to also, I think it benefits states to be really uplifting environmental justice. I mean, understanding that it is a concern of the federal government. Therefore, I think if it would behoove them, in order to position themselves in a better position to get more federal funding, I think by highlighting environmental justice concerns and by the state saying, we have programs that could benefit disadvantaged communities, so we should be first in line for that funding as well. So, and when you look at a lot of the federal spending bills, a lot of the funding is going directly to states for them to distribute. So I think it absolutely benefits states to be advocating for environmental justice, because that positions them in a better, puts them in a better position to get more federal funding as well. And if anybody has any questions that maybe didn't pop up today, but they think of down the line, Bishop Dinkins has my contact information, has our contact information. So more than happy to have a one-on-one conversation with folks as they kind of work through these issues. Obviously, you know, the playbook provides an overview of different ways folks can be organizing around the Justice40 the benefits, the direct investments, whatever those end up being. There are ways that you guys can be organizing around those. However, a lot of this is going to happen within states, within local governments, case-by-case basis. So if you have questions that might be more tailored to your community, you know, please feel free to reach out. You know, that's why we're here, is to help this funding that has historically been inaccessible to make it more accessible. So with that, you know, I will give it back to Shana.
Thank you so much, Artie. I have nothing else unless anyone has anything they would like to add. Again, you can visit our website at blackappalachiancoalition.org for additional information, as well as receiving updates. Just really appreciate the space that everyone has offered us. And I see that Bishop Marcia is here, so I'm going to let her close us out, probably more eloquently than what I'm doing right now. So.
No, you did wonderful. I was trying to stay quiet, but you know, again, I want to thank Artie, Sonia, and Nora for joining us. As Shana said, you know, thanking Orvie and Reimagine Appalachia for the support that they give us with regards to logistics and technology. But more importantly, thanking the participants who helped to make these things happen. As you know, the Black Appalachian Coalition, again, you know, our goal, our desire is to be the octopus head that connects all of the tentacles together so that you can have what you need to build the power that you need to build, to have the voice that you need to have, and to shout as loud as you need to shout for the change that we need so that we can improve our quality of life. So again, I want to thank all of our funders and supporters, the Heinz Endowment Foundation, McKnight Foundation, Groundwork Foundation, the High Tides Foundation, for supporting this work, and ECC again for all the wonderful things that you are doing. It is such an honor and a privilege to build this partnership with you all and with our community. And I just encourage everyone, you know, stay tuned. We have more to come. This is just wetting your whistle so that by the time we come to the point of really building out this coalition, you know what, we'll be ready to hum in solidarity like none other. So I'm wishing you all a wonderful, wonderful day. Again, please mark your calendars for July 22nd through the 24th for our policy summit. Please, go and join the email list so that you'll be updated as to what's going on. You visit our website, it'll show you as well what's going on, like our YouTube, our Facebook channel, and Twitter. And after I've said all that, I just want to say have a great, great day and a great rest of the week. We thank you for coming again. Blessings, everybody.